The Huna Code in Religions by Max Freedom Long. Chapter 1. From Whence Came Huna? Years ago, when Dr. Brigham first recognized in the beliefs and practices of the Hawaiian native priests of Huna a system which contained elements still unknown to modern psychology and religion, the question of the possible origin of this body of knowledge arose. It seemed incredible that men, as untutored and as filled with superstitions as the remote ancestors of the Hawaiians must have been able to originate a system such as the one which enabled the Kahunas to walk unharmed over very hot lava or overheated stones in the oven ceremony, or to bring about instant healing at times, particularly the healing of broken bones, things which Dr. Brigham had investigated at first hand and verified. So far as could be learned, the Polynesians had come to the Pacific Islands not earlier than the year 1 A.D. and had brought the secret knowledge with them. But from whence had they come? Their legends told of a homeland which had been blessed with heavenly dew and which had been overlooked by lovely blue mountains, but nothing in the legends gave definite place to the homeland or told why the several tribes of the Polynesians had decided to leave it in search of new homes in the Pacific. Efforts to trace the path of migration through the language used by the Polynesians had been made by a number of able men, but nothing definite had been learned, other than there were many words to be found in Africa which are duplicated in the tongue of the New Zealand branch of the migrants, the Maoris, and that an excellent dialect of the Polynesian general language is spoken on about half the large island of Madagascar off the east coast of South Africa. Judge Fornander, Fornander, long a resident of Hawaii and an excellent student of the native culture, decided that the Coptic or language of ancient Egypt more closely resembled the Hawaiian than any other. As Egypt became an advanced civilization, at a very early time it was natural that this place and age should be inspected eagerly to determine whether Huna had originated there. The lead showed that Huna had been known there, but nothing was found to indicate that it had not been brought in as a fully developed system and shared, at least in part, with the local priests and the men of learning. Even today, the mystery remains unsolved, and at best we can only speculate concerning possible places and times which might have lent themselves to the working out of such profound knowledge of man and his relation to entities and powers which have only been guessed at in the modern world. To aid this speculation, we have two things to use as starting points. The first is that we must look for an ancient race which had a well-established belief in spirits, and second, a belief in totems and the inevitable totems which accompany such a belief. We have the modern science of geology to aid us in our search before recorded history tells us much about the primitive peoples and their beginnings. We peer curiously at the scars left by the glaciers, and we know that there were several glacial ages. During a period of about 1 million years, ice ages came and went. Oceans rose and fell as much as 450 feet. Great depressions appear to have been made by the weight of ice, only to be filled with water when the ice melted. There were periods of unusual warmth between times of glacial cold, and in the warm times, tropical vegetation grew far above the tropics and left deposits of peat, coal, and oil behind them when pushed back by the next ice age. During this vast reach of time, mankind evolved and moved back and forth around the earth. The different races became distinct in color and characteristics and began to divide themselves into people who lived inland on game animals and those who lived near the water and depended largely on fish for food. Fruit, roots, and nuts were eaten when available, and in time seeds were added to the diet. Gradually, the planting and harvesting of seed-bearing plants developed into the earliest agriculture. Animals were domesticated, and plants developed through the selection of the best types for use into much better food sources. The first tools were made of wood, then of bone, and finally chipped flint. Eventually, the shaping of stone by pecking with hard points or by grinding was learned. Flint points were also used to peck out or to cut pictures into the rock walls of the caves, and it is there that we get our first glimpse of what our ancestors believed and what they did about it. The first crude pictures of animals on cave walls gave way in the following periods to more elaborate drawings, even with the use of color. The first pottery was very crude, but in time it came to be smoothed and decorated. In some way, which is still a mystery, the black Abos, A-B-O-S, or Arunta, A-R-U-N-T-A, people of Australia, reached that southern continent and settled there. They may have been fisher folk when they arrived, but some eventually became hunters living far from the sea. They had no tools other than a throwing stick for use in hunting and a digging stick which also served to whip seeds from the tops of wild grasses into rough wooden trays. They did not weave or plant. All in all, they were the least cultured people on earth. But they had an elaborate religion based on totems, taboos, and magic. They had good psychics and mediums in the clans, and some practiced hypnosis surprisingly well. They even had their own version of the death prayer, which was familiar to the later Polynesians and sent magical death to an enemy while pointing at him with a dagger of bone. They practiced circumcision, just as did the people of the Near East and the Polynesians. They knew the difference between good and bad conduct and had good and bad totem creatures. We do not know as yet whether the Arunta people brought with them their beliefs and culture when they arrived in Australia, or whether they developed these for themselves over a long period of time. However, the similarities of beliefs and customs when compared to those of other world inhabitants strongly suggest an early contact. Some cave remains and drawings in Africa have recently been discovered, but to date our best information has been obtained from the caves in Altamara, A-L-T-A-M-A-R-A, in Spain. These appear to have been occupied for the first time after the 5th glacial period, and on the cave walls can be seen drawings, well executed and often in color, which indicate that at that very early time the belief in magic and totemism was well developed. Tools were made of wood, stone, and bone. Following the earliest evidence of developing cultures, as studied in the cave remains, we can trace the progress of inventions in various parts of the world. In some places, the progress was much swifter than in others. Agriculture and animal husbandry advanced, and better equipment was invented for hunting and fishing, with the spear, club, and knife coming much sooner than the bow and arrow. Boats, hooks, and lines for fishing, and in time nets were evolved. The use of fire and the invention of tools for making fire marked a great step forward. Much later came the first use of metals. Meantime, the peoples of the earth, from the Orunta of Australia to the cave dwellers of the north, had developed one thing in common: the beliefs in spirits and totems. Those who progressed rapidly with their inventions seemed to progress in the matter of religious beliefs as slowly as their more backward brothers. And then it says in brackets, this conservatism in such things as beliefs and customs is still with us. In Christianity, for example, almost no changes have been made in beliefs and rituals in nearly 20 centuries, although our inventions are new and endless. Close bracket. In lands near the equator, or parts which were not reached by the glaciers or the glacial cold, the beginning steps of early civilization may have been made long before the caves in Spain were put to use. The valley of the Nile was greatly favored in many ways. Its climate suffered little change, and its land was fertilized by the mud of the inundation year after year. This applied to a degree in the valley lands of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, where the Sumerian culture developed. In the southern parts of China, the great river valleys also provided places for permanent residence and the development of a series of cultures. In the Americas, the earliest men left little trace of their stay, but much later the lands were again inhabited, and in the lower edge of the modern times, the complicated cultures of Central America developed, with once more the totem and taboo basic to the religious beliefs and practices. In all parts of the world, the knowledge of astronomy was mixed with the totems, so that the sky of the night became filled with the outlines of starry creatures. And I'm going to pause here, and this is about halfway through chapter 1. And this book, by the way, was written in 1965. And I hope you're enjoying it so far. Till soon.